All right, it is right at 8 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get started. We are recording this presentation so that it is available for anyone who may want to review it later or for those members who were not able to join us tonight for the live presentation. So just to let you know, it will be available on our DADD YouTube channel later, probably in the early spring semester. Uh, my name is Dr. Sarah Cox. I am an assistant professor at Michigan State University, and I am the diversity chair for the Division for Autism and Developmental Disabilities through the Council for Exceptional Children. We are so excited to have you all here tonight. I am going to turn it over to one of our DEI slash diversity. Sorry, I am looking at the admits. What? Student representatives who is with me. Oh, I can't even call you a student representative anymore. You've successfully defended your dissertation. So, our recent Dr. Shen.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Guofeng. You can just call me Guofeng. And it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Julie L. Thompson, PhD, BCBD. Dr. Thompson is an associate professor of special education at Texas A&M University, where she also serves as director of the Behavioral Learning Interventions in Children Lab. She is a co-faculty member of the Texas A&M University Institute for Early Childhood Development and Education, and also an affiliated faculty member with the Center on Disability and Development. Dr. Thompson began her career as a classroom teacher for children with autism, which gave her insight into the layered complexities of providing adequate education to individuals with ASD in public schools. Her Blink Lab conducts innovative mixed message research focused on two critical areas. First, academic instruction for students with profound autism and intellectual disabilities. And two, preventing and teaching replacement behaviors to students with interfering problem behaviors in the classroom to support inclusion, communication, independence, and lifelong fulfillment. Dr. Thompson has an exceptional record of scholarly productivity, serving as principal investigator on seven external funded awards totaling nearly 3.9 million and co-PI on four additional awards totaling more than 30 million. She has authored 22 peer-reviewed publications, delivered 58 peer-reviewed conference presentations, and has chaired or co-chaired 17 doctoral students. So please join me in welcome Dr. Julie Thompson.
Great. Thank you so much, Gofen. I appreciate that introduction. So again, my name is Julie Thompson. I am an associate professor at Texas A&M University. And just to give you a little bit of background about me, I wound my way into education. Initially, I started out as what was called a habilitation technician. Back in the day, it'd be similar to what an RBT is nowadays. And I worked in homes for individuals with autism, supporting them in learning skills. One of the issues that I found with that was I seemed to be serving, this was before Medicaid supported this process, and I was really just supporting individuals from wealthy families. I wanted to be able to support all individuals, so I decided to become a teacher. And first was a paraprofessional. That's how I paid my way to go to university. And was a paraprofessional in a preschool classroom for children with autism. And then once I graduated, I became a classroom teacher and taught at the elementary level for children with autism. And those children, I was in a district that said it was fully inclusive, but it was not fully inclusive if you didn't have compliant behaviors. And so the children that were placed in my classroom typically had pretty severe problem behavior, um, uh, may or may not have had intellectual disability, but really needed a lot of support for challenging behavior. I became a BCBA while I was getting my PhD. So I really come at this as a special education teacher first. That's what I know is working in the schools and understanding how to support teachers, having been a teacher myself, and then applying behavior analytic strategies to support special education. And so you'll notice that I may not use all of the what I would call highfalutin terms that behavior analysts use. I know what they are. I can use them if I need to, but I tend to try to speak in a way that is approachable for most teachers and that sort of thing. So let's get started. We're going to talk about how to predict, prevent, and respond to challenging behavior. Now, let me see here. So my agenda for today, I'm going to talk about the importance of emphasizing dignity, using an empathy and a trauma-informed approach, how to predict behaviors, how to prevent problem behaviors from occurring, what to do when problem behaviors occur, and then I'll have a short summary and an opportunity for questions. So I'm going to answer questions at the end, and I'll try to monitor the time to make sure that we do have time. Sarah and Gofen, if you notice that I'm going over, if you could give me a wave at about 15 or 10 minutes too, that'd be great. Thank you. You'll see I have a star beside prevent. That's where I'm going to spend most of my time, as I think we really need to pay as much attention as we can to what we do, how we change our behaviors in order to prevent challenging and problem behaviors from occurring in the classroom. I'm going to have to click. There we go. So Denny Reed is a guy who's worked with individuals with more extensive support needs and challenging behaviors. And he talks about the importance of dignity and that we should treat all people as worthy, honored, esteemed, valued, and respected, and treat them ethically. And I think it's really important that we start with that focus. Sometimes as classroom teachers, when we're working with individuals with severe challenging behaviors, we can get frustrated. We can begin to only see the problem behavior and not really see the individual, the human behind those problem behaviors. And so I want to just bring us back to this concept of really thinking about that individual as a fellow human that should have dignity and respect. And I also want to talk a little bit about trauma-informed care. I'm not saying that all individuals with challenging behavior come from trauma, but we know that individuals with extensive support needs sometimes have a higher likelihood of encountering trauma experiences than others. And so I think if we come from a trauma-informed perspective, it's going to support us in thinking about and working with individuals with challenging behaviors. So one is just being aware that some of the behavior that's occurred, their history of reinforcement, history of experience, may have been influenced by trauma. It's critical that we create safety and trust with the individuals that we're working with. We want to encourage choice and shared governance. And what I mean by shared governance is this idea that we want to empower individuals to have independence, to be able to engage in their daily life and make choices surrounding their daily life as much as possible. And finally, having a focus on skill building when we're working with individuals with challenging behaviors. So let's talk about how we predict these challenging behaviors and why. Why it's important to predict and understand behavior. One is that behavior has patterns. It is lawful. Just like gravity occurs, if I pick up a pen and were to let go of it, it would fall to the ground. And in the same way, behavior is lawful. It's not random. And if we attend to it, we should begin to be able to see patterns emerge across context and time. Also, being able to predict enables us to prevent behaviors from occurring because we can begin to adjust routines. We can look at what we can do before behavior escalates to the most severe problem level behavior. The more we predict and the better we get at it, the more we're able to instruct, again, focusing on that skill building and support. What my goal is for individuals is that they can shift from crisis, from constantly having to put out fires, to being able to teach, to engage with the individual and support them in positive outcomes in their life. So, what do I mean by lawful behavioral relations? We typically talk about a behavioral event, and in this instance, I'm going to talk about problem behavior as occurring in the context of things that happen before and things that happen after the behavior. We think of a setting event, a predictor, happening before the problem behavior, and the consequences happening immediately after the problem behavior. So, for example, setting events are those things that can occasion the likelihood of a problem behavior occurring. So, for example, I had a student come in one day very upset, was easily agitated. Things that typically didn't bother him bothered him. And I found out later that he'd been up in the night. His parent had had a medical emergency, and the ambulance came, took his father away. And then he came to school. So that's a setting event. It's not something that happens right before the behavior occurs, but it happens sometime prior to the behavior occurring, and it influences our likelihood to be more frustrated or be more likely to exhibit problem behavior. It can include being tired, hungry, having fear. It can be related to issues related to limitations that the individual may have in, for example, in academic content or in the use of fine motor skills, that sort of thing. Those things can occasion the likelihood that problem behavior may occur. Sorry, I've got a drippy nose. I'll find a tissue in a minute if I need it. And then the predictor is that thing that happens immediately before the behavior occurs. So like, right, we see the behavior occurring and we think, what happened right before it? A lot of times, the things that can occasion problem behavior are transitions, having to move from one activity to the next activity. That can be physically or staying in their seat, but having to transition from one activity that they were doing in their seat to a new activity that they were doing. Unstructured time is also an opportunity where problem behaviors are more likely to occur. And then having demands placed on them can also predict the likelihood that problem behavior can occur. And then there are consequences that occur, and we've determined through our analysis of behavior over time that there are typically 4 areas that influence the likelihood that the behavior is going to occur repeatedly. One is if the problem behavior results in escape from something that is aversive or that's that they don't like, that's difficult for them. It can be attention, to seek and gain attention. It can be to access something or someone, access an activity or access an item or access attention from another individual. And then there are sensory reasons why individuals engage in a behavior, something we may not really know. It could be a migraine. It could be that the lighting in the room is difficult and hard to deal with. And also, I think it's really important for you to know that we talk about it as if they're four separate consequences, but usually they're really tied together. Because if I leave the room when I'm not supposed to, we call that eloping. If I elope, I'm likely going to get a whole lot of attention, particularly if I'm running out towards the street or the highway. So I'm not only have I escaped something maybe that was hard for me, but I gained attention. So a lot of times these consequences are intertwined. And it's important to know that as we begin to talk about replacement behaviors and things like that. So just to go and talk a little bit about setting events and predictors, again, what the difference between them are, is again, setting events are those distant factors that increase the likelihood that a behavior is going to occur. And the predictors are those immediate events that trigger the behavior. And one of the great things is once we know what those setting events are and can identify them, once we know what those predictors are, we can develop interventions to target either or both in order to adjust those predictors and reduce the likelihood that those behaviors occur in the future. What I like to do when I'm talking to a teacher, as I'm talking to those of you that are teachers, students, and other roles, is I ask if you were to say it usually happens when. We generally know or have a sense of the pattern of that behavior. And so if I say it usually happens when and ask someone to fill in the blank, they can say, when I ask him to take his coat off in the morning. When the alarm bell goes to transition to a new class, we can typically determine that predictor. And so that's what we want to think about when we're trying to engage and identify ways to change those predictors, is to know, when does it usually happen? But another thing that's really critical, particularly when it comes to severe challenging behavior, I'm talking about those behaviors such as trying to run away, run out into the street, into an area that's dangerous, engaging in aggressive behaviors towards themselves, such as self-injurious behavior, or engaging in aggressive behaviors towards others. We can consider precursor behaviors. And precursor behaviors are behaviors that typically happen just before the problem behavior. And it's really critical that we try to identify those precursor behaviors. So, for example, I had a student, and when he started to get really agitated, he would curl his lip and bare the front of his teeth. And so if I saw that lip curl, I knew that an aggressive behavior was about to occur. I worked with another student who would say, all right, that's it. And that meant he was about to strip his clothes off, because when he got mad, he would strip. And so again, there's different ways that we can see that problem behavior is about to occur, and we can try to intervene on those precursor behaviors. So again, a precursor behavior is a behavior that usually occurs before the severe problem behavior. And it's functionally related to the severe problem behavior, meaning it is getting the same consequence, that attention, that escape, that access to something, or that sensory experience. And therefore, because it's functionally related, it should respond similarly to changes, environmental changes, as the problem behavior does. So we can begin to intervene when we see the precursor behavior instead of waiting for that major escalation to occur. So research has shown that if we do a functional analysis on precursor behaviors and engage in interventions which address those precursor behaviors, we are much less likely to see the extreme behaviors, the self-injurious behaviors, or the aggression, those sorts of things. So going back, and what that means is we don't have to wait for a problem behavior to occur before we intervene. And this also means we can increase safety by addressing that precursor behavior. And an example article is by Borlace et al. 2017, who engaged in some work looking at intervening in precursor behaviors. So going back to this idea that behavior occurs lawfully, that there are predictors and there are consequences, I think I want you to begin focusing on what are those precursor behaviors, okay? So begin thinking to yourself, when you have seen this behavior occur, has there consistently been one or more behaviors that happen just prior to the problem behavior occurring? And if they are, then that's when you can begin to consider intervening in the behavior instead of waiting for that severe problem behavior to occur. So let's talk about, once we have predicted when a behavior occurred, what we can do to prevent some of those behaviors. This is, some of you may be familiar with this. This is a competing behavior pathways model. It's, again, the pathway typically that occurs is there's a setting event and a predictor that results in a problem behavior. And that problem behavior accesses a consequence that increases the likelihood that the individual is going to engage in those problem behaviors again in the future. But what I want to talk to you about right now is how we can interrupt that. We can have a competing pathway that stops the setting event from occurring or the predicting event from occurring, so that that problem behavior is less likely to occur. So I'm going to go over some instructional strategies to use before the behavior happens. And to me, this slide is probably the most important slide that I'm going to go over and talk with you about today. I think it's extremely critical that we build rapport, or sometimes people use the term pair ourselves as a positive individual, someone that they smile and light up when they see you. That's who we want to be as teachers, as interventionists, as individuals who engage with individuals with autism and developmental disabilities, is that positive person. And so it's really critical that you get to know your student. And I have encountered times when I've been working with individuals and said, you know, what is he or she like to do? And they'll say, you know, I don't know. Or, well, this one thing. They like to do this one thing because that's the behavior that the individual engages with the most. But they don't really know the broad spectrum of likes and dislikes of the individual. And so it's really critical that you get to know their likes and dislikes. And the way that you can do that is through the use of preference assessments. You can do it very formally, where you sit down at a table and you put things in front of them and say, pick one, and you see what they select, take data on what they select. You can do what's called a free operant assessment, where you just make available in the room that they're in different activities or things for them to engage with to see. And that's how to get to know the stuff items that they enjoy doing, but also you want to get down with that individual, engage with them, respond to them. So I was in a classroom last week observing students, and I got down on the level of a student, and I overheard her singing. I don't sing well. I don't necessarily enjoy singing. I do enjoy singing, actually, but not publicly. But she was singing, instead of baby sharks, doot, 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 doot. I'm not going to sing. She was singing Santa Shark, ho, ho. And so I just repeated that after her. And then she gave me eye contact and smiled and started the song again. And then I repeated it and we began to play together. I started walking my fingers towards her and she'd walk her fingers towards me. And then I gave her a high five. And then I engaged with a toy near her. She showed no interest in the toy, so I left that alone. But I was really intentionally engaging with the individual. There's an author with the last name Lugo, Lugo, who has done some work in this area, particularly in the area of early childhood, and has sort of operationally defined how you can pair yourself with someone. If you're interested in looking into that, you can. Um, the other thing that's really critical in building rapport is, and I ask myself this sometimes as a mother, how many times am I engaging with my son other than telling him what to do, right? Is he like, here comes mom, she's going to tell me what to do? Or am I engaging him in conversation or talking about what he wants to do or having a good time with him? Unfortunately, I spend a lot of my time with demands, placing demands on him. And so he does have that eye roll, here comes mom behavior. So that's an area of growth for me where I can begin to build rapport and think about engaging with him. And the same thing can happen in classrooms where we're constantly putting task demands. All we're thought of is this person who controls me and makes me do stuff. For example, when teaching a young child to respond to their name, it's critically important that you not just teach them to respond to their name to ask them to do something or stop engaging in something, but you give them something fun. They're going to be much more likely to respond to you and respond to their name if there's something positive that occurs when they look up or stop what they're doing and turn to you. And in the same way, in building rapport, you need to think about playful interaction. And if you're like me, I am a taskmaster. I'm always thinking, what have I got to do? How can I engage? I do this when I'm instructing students in the college level. I want to walk in, go over what I have to teach, and then move on to the next task that I've got. I've got 100 things in my list of to-dos. But I schedule engagement with my students because they're more likely to attend to me and to respond to me effectively if they know that I care about them as individuals. And the same is shown for individuals with autism. And so there have been studies, for example, where students have been offered the opportunity to do nothing, to engage in a preferred activity, or to engage with someone that they have positive relationship with before starting work. And two things with these studies. One, they typically will prefer to actually engage with another individual that is a fun person before starting the work. And then the other thing that we see with that research is if we've engaged in rapport building prior to asking them to do an academic task, we're going to see better acquisition of skills and less challenging and problem behaviors. Okay. So it works. This rapport building, it's not just touchy feely. Early on when I was thinking about being a reinforcing individual, I thought, I'm not tap dancing for someone just to get them to do what I need to do. But now actually, you don't want to watch me tap dance, but I will do what it takes to build rapport with my students. And then the other thing that's really critically important is empathizing. So when they're frustrated, acknowledging their frustration. I see this is difficult for you. Shall we take a break and try again later? Okay. So again, build rapport. If you take nothing else from my discussion today, it's just critical that you build rapport with the individuals that you're working with. Some other preventative activities are structure and routines. Structure and predictability create safety. It's helpful for us to know where the boundaries lie, and we tend to feel more comfortable and safe in the context of a structured and predictable environment. The other thing about structure and routines is it promotes independence. If we have a consistent way in which we teach a lesson, if we have a consistent way in which we go through the day, individuals can begin to do those things independently without having to be told at every single time to engage in a certain behavior. Also, being in a calm setting typically results in calm behaviors. Being in a chaotic, unpredictable setting is more likely to induce problem and challenging behavior. So it's critical that we engage in and provide structure and routines in our classrooms. The other thing that's critically important is providing choice. Again, if we look at the research in choice making, it provides opportunities for self-determination for individuals to be independent and have autonomy, independence over their life. And it often reduces problem behavior. And so you want to offer choices throughout the day. You may still have to place demands where there is no choice. But whenever you can offer choice, if it doesn't matter whether they do the writing assignment before the reading assignment, let them choose which activity to do first. You can also provide structured choices where you say, would you like to do X or Y? They have to pick one of those. It's a structured choice. Or you can provide, when an opportunity avails itself, open-ended choices for them. And the other thing that's critical is to vary those choices. Going back to when we talked about building rapport and knowing what individuals like and want to engage in, I loved jam pants and jelly shoes when I was 8 years old. Jam pants are like long shorts that made a swishing sound when you walked. They're sort of made out of tent material from back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And jelly shoes are plastic shoes that you can see your feet through. I don't like them anymore. So to know me, you would know that my choices, my interests have changed over time. And so we may assume, this is what they like and they're not picking it. It could be that their choices have changed over time. And just try to remember that. Provide opportunities for access to various choices. Another critical thing is to provide visual supports. We know specifically with individuals with autism that visual supports are very helpful. If you're familiar with cognitive load, that's how much you're holding in your mind at one time. An individual with autism has difficulty generally with processing communication or social interactions. So if they're having to work hard to engage in communication and having to work hard to process social interactions, we can make it a little easier on them by providing them a visual that's easier for them to process. It can reduce that uncertainty, and it can also support independence. And visuals can be used for so many different things. You can use visuals for transition. When I was a classroom teacher, I had a young man who would, at the beginning of the school year, he would fall to the floor and refuse to leave the room anytime we took him to the door. And the speech language pathologist said, well, why don't we show him pictures of where we're going? And I was like, duh. Why don't we show him pictures of where we're going? Maybe that would reduce the uncertainty for him. And then we found that he was willing to leave the room anytime except for when it said PE. So it also helped us to recognize that the uncertainty for him was he did not like going to PE. It was overstimulating and frustrating for him. But he was happy to go to the lunchroom, music, library, to a class with his peers. Prior to that, he wouldn't leave the room at all. So we provided him with that visual support, and it supported his transition. Visual supports can help with expectations. What are the rules in class? It can help with routines, understanding what's happened next. I follow my visual support, my calendar app on my phone, knowing all the tasks that I have throughout the day. I schedule them down to the 30-minute increment from 8 to 5, and that brings me a sense of comfort and also a sense of achievement when I've been able to complete the activities in my routine. The same goes for individuals with autism. And you can use visual supports to break down activities. So if you're familiar with task analysis, that's just a fancy word for breaking an activity into steps, achievable steps. We can think of those achievable steps, and we can put visuals alongside them to help an individual complete a math problem, or to help an individual know what the steps are for washing their hands, or using feminine hygiene products in the bathroom. Again, if you can think of it, we can provide a visual support. Some things that you want to consider when you're thinking about the use of visual supports are consistency of use, accessibility, making them accessible and at the sight line for the individual, and making them as simple and as clear as possible. So that's really important when you think about engaging and using visual supports with individuals. Just checking my time, I'm doing okay. And then there's two things called pre-corrections and priming that can also be really helpful when we know that we may be going into a problematic situation or an activity that in the past has resulted in problem behavior. And a pre-correction is sort of reminding people. So, you know, a typical teacher in just about any school at the elementary level is going to say something like, you know, hands to yourself and mouths quiet in the hallway. That would be an example of a pre-correction. Before we go outside, we remind you these are the activities or expectations before that transition or task. And that can be enough to for some individuals to support them engaging in the appropriate behavior. They just need to be reminded. Priming is providing a preview of what's going to happen next. Providing opportunities to rehearse or practice what's going to happen. And so the use of a social story about an activity that's about to occur could be considered a type of priming that previews what's happening. And then you can have an individual practice. Okay, we're going to go to Target, and we're going to buy ingredients for the thing that we're going to cook in our classroom. When we get to the checkout line, the checkout person's going to say hello. What do you do when they say hello? You say hello back. So we'll practice that. You're going to have to give them your item, but guess what? They will give it back. They just have to take it for just a minute and slide it across the machine and make it beep, and then they can hand it back to you. Let's practice. You give it to me, I'll give it right back. Again, those are just examples of priming. And both of these things reduce surprise. Again, that uncertainty that can cause anxiety or frustration for individuals and generally result in smoother transitions. And another thing that you want to consider doing is reducing task demands. Prior to reducing the task demands, you want to even ask, do I need to give this instruction? We're giving so many instructions to children throughout the day. Are there opportunities when we could reduce the number of instructions that we give them? Do we have to tell them how to structure their playtime? Could we just let them engage in that sensory behavior during their playtime? The other thing is thinking about how to make those tasks a little bit easier or to be able to cope with them. So one is varying the activities you ask the child to engage in. I talk about this a lot when one of my other areas is access to the general curriculum and teaching academic instruction to individuals. And when I was first a teacher, I had a student who had an IEP that said they needed to identify the numbers 1 through 20 and match the numbers 1 through 20. And so I got a sentence strip and I put my Velcro on the sentence strip and I wrote the numbers on the sentence strip, and then I had a number that they could match. And I had a student, we had 180 days of school, and for 180 days, that was their activity that helped them to learn to identify the numbers 1 through 20. And frankly, if you asked me to do that same activity every day, multiple times a day for 180 days, I would probably get frustrated with you. When I learned that I could teach the identifying numbers 1 through 20 through lots of different math activities, exploratory activities, science activities, and they could still be matching 1 through 20, that reduced a lot of the problem behaviors that I saw in the classroom because I was varying the activities. The goal was still matching those numbers, but the activities were varied. The other thing is to think about, is this task too difficult for the individual to engage in? So how can I simplify that activity? Can I provide prompting or some level of support so that they can engage in errorless learning instead of, if they get frustrated with making errors, instead of having to make errors in order to learn? And then there's something called behavioral momentum. And it's really like if you, I have actually on my wrist, I have a thing that says just start. Just getting started is a type of behavioral momentum. If I open up my computer and then I go to Microsoft Word and I open Microsoft Word, and then I open the paper that I'm going to write, all those steps build momentum. Those are easy steps. Then I'm more likely to engage in the writing. In the same way, we can use behavioral momentum with children. Having them engage in tasks they enjoy or tasks that they're good at, that are neutral to them, first will increase the likelihood that they will then engage in more difficult tasks. And again, there's research to indicate this. Research on high probability, low probability tasks, research on task interspersal, different types of behavioral momentum where we're engaging individuals in easier or preferred tasks, and then then they do the tasks, so you kind of catch them out. They don't even know they're doing it. They begin to do the thing that you wanted them to do. Okay, thank you. Yeah, good. I'll be quick, but I think we should be good. Let me look at the time. Yeah. I can do this in 10 minutes. So those are some strategies to think about related to the setting, event, and predictors. The other thing that we want to do is teach better behaviors. We need those better behaviors to result in the same consequences that the problem behavior resulted in. So they need to engage in a behavior that's going to result in escape or attention or access or sensory. And it's important that we think about that. And the main behaviors that we want to teach, typically to individuals that are experiencing these severe problem behaviors, are the ability to communicate their wants and needs. Do they have a way to communicate effectively? We want to teach them to ask for help. We want to teach them how to appropriately recruit attention. Hey, can I tell you a joke? Hey, do you have a minute to talk? And to request a break when they need a break from something that's hard. So those are the skills, the main what to teaches that you want to think about, that if they have these skills, it's going to reduce a lot of the problem behaviors that they engage in. And again, I can't go into huge detail about the how to teach, but in general, the skills that you want to teach are to embed those opportunities throughout the day. So communicating wants and needs. If the student has an AHC device or has a picture communications schedule, providing them with multiple opportunities during periods when there's low stress, not as many task demands, when they're likely to engage, provide them with opportunities to practice. And that's when you're pre-teaching and rehearsing those skills during those non-critical times. So I'm going to teach an individual to communicate their wants and needs related to eating food items, not when they're starving. I'm not going to wait till they're starving and then say, oh, you got to tell me first before I give it to you, that's going to cause a problem behavior. But if it's snack time and they had breakfast, that might be a good opportunity for us to practice exchanging a picture in order to access food, for example. And thinking about pre-teaching some of those other behaviors, whether they're social skills or other activities. When you're teaching these skills, you want to provide continuous reinforcement. That means every single time they show you that new skill that they're establishing, you reinforce it. After they get really good at it, then you can begin to say, man, you're doing so good. I may not give you a high five every time you get it right, but know in my mind, I'm giving you a high five. And then give them on a variable schedule, on occasion, provide them reinforcement for that skill. And then once they know how to do the skill one way, begin to teach variation. So it's important that we know how to do that skill with other people, in other environments, in other ways. And so providing that instruction of teaching the variations of the skill. And now, just briefly, I'm going to talk to you about responding. When that really challenging behavior occurs, what do? You ensure safety, okay? Make sure they're safe, that they're not able to harm themselves, that they're not able to harm others. If they're having severe challenging behavior, sometimes it's better to get everybody else out than to try to ask them to transition. Another thing that's really important is that you remain calm. Calm reflects calm. Calm begets calm. Also minimize your attention to the behavior. Let them work through their emotions. Reduce and remove those demands. Now's not a time to make them do something, even though you feel like, but I'm reinforcing the problem behavior. This problem behavior I'm talking about is that severe challenging behavior. In that moment, we just want them to be safe. We want to empathize and recognize that they are too, what's the word I'm trying to say? I'm thinking of our brainstem, which is the first part of our brain that developed as humans. And in that area, that's where we have our fight or flight mode. And when we're in our brainstem, we're much less likely to be in our in the areas of our mind where we can communicate, respond, understand, respect, engage. So when an individual's in that fight or flight, they just need to be made to be safe and secure. If they do attempt or use an appropriate behavior, reinforce that immediately for them. That's critically important. And after the problem behavior ends, reassess the predictors and reinforcers again. What happened just before this behavior occurred? Let me think through how and what we can do in the future. After the behavior ends, respond to them with empathy. I see you had a really hard time. I'm so sorry. That was so difficult for you. Also check your own emotions. I know that I immediately react internally with anger if someone touches or hits me in the face. I don't have, it is what it is. It pisses me off. And so it happened in a class last year. A kid threw something across the room, hit me in the face. I was mad. I had this internal emotion, but I checked it. And I did my best not to show that emotion to that child. It's not something that you want to take personally, even though we may have those initial emotions that we have. And the next thing is use it as a teaching opportunity, not an opportunity to punish, as much as possible. Again, responding to individuals with dignity and care. After they've had a crisis event that's resulted in them engaging in those severe problem behaviors. So in summary, be the positive agent in the life of your students. Do everything you can to be that reinforcing person that they want to engage with and know. Do your best to predict and prevent those problem behaviors as much as you can. If they occur, maintain safety for them, and then focus on how do we build the skills they need so that they don't have to communicate in that challenging way. So thank you. I know I flew through a lot of content. Um, Challenging behaviors, there's no easy pill to fix it, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have at this time. So.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. I really appreciate how you have laid everything out so comprehensively while providing enough information to give people a taste and hopefully feel empowered to implement some of these things. And also, I know myself, I'm going to go do some more research for myself to learn even more. At this point, Dr. Thompson is able to answer questions and or we are open to comments if anyone, any of the participants that have joined us today have any questions or comments that they would like to share with the group. We have lots of thank yous in the chat. Paul has shared they love the emphasis on dignity, empathy, and relationships. Agreed. Especially in this line of work, it is not always something that we hear a lot of. So thank you for that. Lori, please feel free to unmute yourself. I see your virtual hand is raised.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. I teach some undergraduates, special education teachers, and
Mhm.
I was struck by your comment on building rapport because, I feel like it's obvious, but one of the things I'm seeing is that students are paying, and this is certainly not a blanket statement, but paying a lot less attention to the kind of the mechanics of teaching, building a good quality lesson, and really like to give that blanket response at the end of every essay. Like, I've just, what matters the most is that we have a great relationship. It's a
Mhm.
great relationship. I'm like, that is awesome. If you don't know what you're doing, they're not going to learn.
Mhm.
So, how do you find that? I mean, a relationship is important, but do
Mhm.
you find that some students, especially kids who are engaging in problem behavior, do you find that they need a, a more intense rapport building, and then on the other hand, maybe other students don't need as much of that? Or do you think really and truly everybody's needs to have this really high quality rapport with their teacher?
Sure. I mean, I think rapport building is really important with all individuals. There's a study. I can't remember the author of the study. They did they worked with college students and looked at their work output and their response effort in relation to being engaged with empathy and rapport prior to the task they were given, and it showed productivity was much better.
Mhm.
So it works with adults if you think from an organizational behavior management perspective. Um, so I also know that a lot of unstructured time results in a lot of challenging behavior. So we want to have active student engagement and responding and know those skills and those teaching skills to support the learners
Mhm.
as well, because I can't spend 7 hours a day playing with a child in that intensive way.
Mhm.
And I don't have to get to know my undergraduates to the same degree that I need to get to know an individual that's really engaging in, they're giving themselves a concussion every day because they're headbanging.
Okay.
It's a very different level of intensity of support. But I would say broadly, it's good that they want to build relationships and that they see the students as individuals, and then just refocusing them back to, the importance of learning, because for them to be able to have satisfaction and independence in their lifelong outcomes, they'll need skills that they need to learn, and we want to provide them those supports as well.
This was great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Have taken a lot of notes for my own children as
Oh,
well.
great.
Thank you. Tal also wrote in the comments and asked what would be your recommendations for students that are earning or about to earn their credentials. So I know for the sake of time, maybe if you have one or two, like what would you want them to take away?
Um, for students, I guess I'm having a hard time understanding the question. But if I'm thinking about individuals that are just about to become a teacher, that rapport building is critical. That emphasis on dignity is critical. Giving examples and non-examples. Denny Reed has a paper. It's how to address adults with extensive support needs. And he operationalizes things like we don't talk about individuals in their presence. We don't use negative connotations when we're talking about individuals and different things like that. I think that's critically important and a behavior that can occur. And then maintaining safety and being a teacher, that it's not about you're in control, but that it's about you're helping to develop skills that are needed to support success. Because I think we can get in a battle with children if we're not careful, where we have this struggle. And so I think it's critical that we engage in that. Gofen is asking about culture. Culture is hugely important, and I think that goes along with getting to know your student as an individual, understanding that eye contact in cultures is different. Understanding that social interactions or social approaches may or may not be appropriate for a given culture. So yeah, it's critical that you think about those things and are aware of those things as you're working with individuals. During Ramadan, don't hand out candy to all the kids in the classroom if the students aren't, supposed to be eating for that period of time during the day. Think about other ways to provide reinforcement. Yeah.
They're all great points. Thank you.
And you can email me if you have specific questions. My website is like okay, but if you email me, I can refer you to it. But one of the things is we're building supports and video models and strategies for individuals to be able to use to support classroom instruction and addressing challenging and problem behaviors. I have a grant that's funding that work, and so that will be built over time if individuals want access to that or just have any other questions. And if you're a teacher and you want to learn skills and are interested in research, reach out. I always have an interest in conducting research and have the capability to do that in remote settings. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other last minute questions? We have about 3 minutes left. If I might, I would just extend, Julie, I think your answer for Tal's question about what would you recommend for future teachers. The only thing I would potentially add on is a combination of what we've been talking about. So surround yourself with other people who are passionate about engaging in this work and being critical and reflective about how we are intentionally engaging with children and their families, and that we are maintaining that dignity and empathy as we are working with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of great research out there. There's a great training. Dr. Greg Hanley has a website. It's if you
PFA.
FTF. And I don't know what that stands for, but if you put in Hanley and FTF Consulting, he has some free trainings. Most of them are paid, they're not too expensive. But he has a real excellent approach to providing a dignified approach. He talks about televisability of our behavior. Everything we do, we want to think, if I were on TV, would I be engaging in the same behavior as I am in the classroom? And sometimes that can help, really solidify for you what's an appropriate ethical behavior and what isn't. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point. So I see a few people are asking for the link to your website and how they will get access to the presentation. So when you registered for today's event, if you signed up with your email asking for additional information, you will get the link from me eventually of the availability on the DADD YouTube channel. If you did not sign up for that follow-up email, that's perfectly fine. You can always just go to the DADD website and look through for the YouTube channel link, and it will take you there and it'll list all of the videos for you to be able to access. And Julie put her website in the chat. Thank you so much. Oh, and Tal linked you to our YouTube site.
great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tal.
All right, then I'm going to go ahead and end our meeting. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And thank you so much, Dr. Thompson, for this very helpful information. We appreciate
Thank
it very
you.
much.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for asking. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone.
Night.
Yeah.